The morning the quiet ended, I was steeping chamomile in my favorite blue glazed mug, watching the rain collect in little rivers down the kitchen window. The house creaked in that familiar way. Miriam used to say it was the old bones of the place stretching awake. I had grown to love that silence, that reliable hush between footsteps, that breath between days. Then came the tires on wet gravel. I glanced out the window and nearly dropped my mug. Cedric's navy SUV pulled into the driveway, its wipers flailing like panicked arms. From the back spilled two grandkids, Ansel and Nicolette, hoods up and backpacks slung low. Then Fleur emerged in a white trench coat, not a single drop touching her. Cedric got out last arms full of coats, a nervous smile already plastered on his face. I opened the front door just as Fleur waved toward the trunk. Ansel grabbed the maroon suitcase, and the blue one, and my makeup bag. She didn't look at me, didn't say hello. Cedric leaned in for an air kiss. "Hi, Mom." Surprise? I know it's sudden. It was. The last I heard, they were planning spring renovations on their house in the city. No mention of a visit, let alone this. "We thought we'd stay here for a bit while the flooring cures," he added, eyes darting away. "Just a couple of weeks." They carried in 6 suitcases. Fleur floated past me into the living room, shaking her hair out and eyeing the shelves like an appraiser. "Oh, this lamp would look better by the window," she murmured, already unplugging it. Nicolette helped me move this ottoman. I followed them in, clutching my tea. My knitting basket was gone from the side table. Fleur had replaced it with a small, thorny succulent. Cedric started unpacking boxes from the SUV, candles, throw pillows, a digital speaker dock. I stood still like a misplaced antique in my own home. Later that afternoon, I found Fleur opening the linen closet. "Do you mind if I reorganize these?" she asked without waiting for an answer. "I brought our own sheets, they're hypoallergenic." I smiled because it was the only armor I had at that moment. Then I turned and walked toward the kitchen, my tea now cold in my hand. I stared out at the gray waterline beyond the bay window, feeling the damp settle into my joints. That was when I heard Cedric's voice down the hall. "Fleur will take the master right." It was on the 3rd morning that Fleur brought it up, just as I was buttering toast in the kitchen and pretending not to mind that my coffee had been replaced by some oat-based alternative Cedric claimed was better for my joints. "I've been thinking," she said, glancing at me over her cup of green tea. "It might be safer for you to move downstairs. The sunroom has that lovely view of the garden, and it's much closer to the bathroom." I looked up slowly. "Safer." Yes, Cedric chimed in from the other side of the table, his tone measured. "It's just temporary. We don't want you straining yourself on the stairs. Fleur and I can take the master. It's easier with our stuff anyway." My toast sat untouched. "I've been climbing those stairs for over 30 years, I said quietly. "Which is exactly why you shouldn't have to anymore," Fleur added already, tapping a message into her phone. "Let's not make this difficult. It's just more practical." By lunchtime, the decision had apparently been made. Fleur was directing Ansel to carry their suitcases upstairs, while Cedric followed me with a small cardboard box labeled Mom's Essentials. I didn't argue, not out of agreement, but because I suddenly didn't trust myself to speak without my voice cracking. The sunroom was colder than I remembered, draftier. It still smelled faintly of potting soil and citronella from last summer. They had moved a folding cot in against the far wall and draped it with a stiff white sheet. One pillow, a wool throw. My nightstand and lamp were already in place like props on a stage I hadn't auditioned for. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked differently now. I could hear Fleur's laugh echoing down the staircase, the television in the master, playing something sharp and tinny. My feet were cold, but I didn't want to get up. I stared at the ceiling and waited for morning. The next day, while looking for a scarf I was certain I had left in the upstairs closet, I stepped into the master bedroom for the first time since they took it. My photos were gone from the wall. Miriam's quilt had been folded and stacked on a chair in the corner. Fleur's silk robes hung on the closet door like flags claiming new territory. On the nightstand, her laptop was still open. I didn't mean to look. I truly didn't. But the email was right there, bold and unread. Subject: new address for moving. 117 Sycamore Lane. My address. My house. It was sent to her parents. By the end of the week, my house no longer looked like mine. Fleur had swapped out the lace curtains in the dining room for what she called linen shears, dull gray things that hung like funeral shrouds. She claimed the old ones smelled musty, though I'd washed them just the month before. Then came the paint swatches. Light pewter, soft moss, something neutral and marketable, she murmured while brushing her fingers along the edge of the kitchen cabinets. Marketable one afternoon, I walked into the garage to find 2 cardboard boxes labeled Donate. Fragile. Inside were my vintage teacups, Miriam's floral-patterned china, and 3 porcelain salt cellars I'd bought in Quebec on our honeymoon. I pulled them out with trembling hands. 2 were already cracked. One shattered when I tried to lift its sharp edges, slicing into my palm. I didn't tell anyone. At dinner, the table was set with plain white dishes and chrome utensils Fleur had brought from their apartment. She had made lentil stew. Good for cholesterol, she said, as she ladled it out. I noticed Cedric hadn't looked at me once since we sat down. He spent most of the meal answering emails on his phone. When I brought up the china, Fleur shrugged. They were taking up so much space and, honestly, a bit dated. Don't you think I didn't answer? I didn't have the strength to argue over things already broken. That night, as I gathered laundry in the living room, I saw it my wedding photo. It was lying face up on the coffee table beneath a sweating glass of kombucha. Fleur had used it as a coaster. The bottom corner was warped and fogged, the color lifting under the condensation. I stood over it for a moment. Then I picked it up, dried it with my sleeve, and slipped it into my pocket. Back in the sunroom, I added it to the small pile I'd begun stashing in a shoebox beneath the cot. My wedding photo, 2 teacups that had survived my mother's thimble, and the music box Miriam gave me the year we bought the house. I was running out of space in that box. It was just after dusk when Nicolette knocked on the frame of the sunroom door. I was folding the last of my laundry, the radio playing faintly behind me. She didn't usually come down here. She hovered for a moment before stepping inside. "Can I sit?" she asked softly. I nodded and moved a stack of towels off the edge of the cot. She sat without speaking, at first, legs crossed, fingers twisting the drawstring of her hoodie. Her usual aloofness was gone. Tonight, she looked like a child trying to hold in a secret too big for her shoulders. "Grandma," she began, voice low, "I think you should know something." I set the folded towel down in my lap. I heard Mom and Dad talking. "Late last night, they think you'd be better off somewhere else. Somewhere with help. They've already looked at a place called Meadowview." Dad put down a deposit. My breath caught, but I didn't let it show. "An assisted living place." She nodded, her eyes on the floor. "They said it's just temporary. That it would be safer and less stressful for everyone while we all adjust." "To what exactly?" She swallowed. "Mom's parents are moving in. They sold their place in Astoria. They're coming next month. They're already packing." I felt a strange stillness inside me, like the moment before glass breaks. Meadowview, my replacement. My eviction sealed in polite euphemisms and rationales. "They didn't want to tell you yet," Nicolette whispered. "But I thought you should know. I know this isn't fair." I reached out and touched her wrist gently. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. That was brave." She nodded, biting her lip. Later that night, I sat awake in the sunroom with the shoebox beside me. Outside, the wind hissed against the old windows, and the heater clicked unevenly through the vents. I looked down at the music box, the warped photograph, the thimble, and the bent spoon I'd hidden. The day Fleur replaced all the silverware. They wanted me out, but I hadn't survived this long just to be quietly erased. I waited until Fleur and Cedric left for an open house in town, some friend of theirs flipping properties, hoping for a quick sale. I told Nicolette I needed a few hours to clear my head, and she offered to cover for me without being asked. Desmond lived just outside of town, in a weathered Craftsman, with ivy creeping up its porch columns. We'd gone to school together once, then reconnected years later, after he helped Miriam and me draw up our wills. He'd retired last spring, but he still kept a small office above his garage, more out of habit than necessity. He welcomed me in with a puzzled smile. "Salome, you look like you've come carrying a storm." I handed him the manila folder I'd dug out from the fireproof box in the coat closet, deed papers. The original mortgage release the notarized will Miriam and I had signed in 1994. "I need you to tell me who owns my house," I said, simply. He read in silence for a long stretch. The only sound was the ticking of a wall clock, shaped like a barn owl. Finally, he looked up. "You do." I blinked. "Are you sure?" Desmond nodded. "The deed is still in your name. Cedric never transferred it. I remember him calling me years ago asking about gift tax penalties. I told him it'd be steep unless he inherited. Looks like he decided to leave it untouched." I exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting off my ribs. "So technically, I said I can do whatever I want with it." He gave me a measured look. "Legally, yes. Morally, that's your judgment. But if you're asking me whether you can sell it, evict them, renovate, burn it to the ground, yes. It's yours, Salome. All of it." When I stepped out onto his porch, the air felt colder, but somehow cleaner. I stood still beneath the pale sun and listened to the wind move through the dry trees. My house wasn't theirs. They had forgotten the most important detail of all. I never gave it away. Desmond moved quickly once I gave him the go-ahead. Within 2 days, he'd arranged for me to meet Ginevra Alcott, a discreet agent with graying curls and eyes that missed nothing. We met at a quiet bakery 3 towns over, where no one would recognize me. She arrived early and already had comps pulled up on her tablet. "I specialize in non-traditional agreements," she said, without preamble. "And I don't like bullies." We spent nearly 2 hours going over options. I told her I wasn't just looking to sell. I needed security and space and a slice of dignity that couldn't be bargained away. She listened without blinking, then nodded. I might have just the person. His name was Cormac Ellery, a sculptor, widowed, mid-60s. He'd spent most of his life tucked in the hills above Santa Fe before selling his studio and deciding to find a home by the sea with a soul. Apparently mine had caught his eye before it ever hit the open listings. He came up the following week, Ginevra driving him personally. We met at the Botanical Garden under the pretense of a community class. Cormac was tall and lean with sun-leathered skin and hands that looked like they'd worked stone and bread dough in equal measure. He didn't speak in flattery. He spoke in facts and kindness. "I'm not interested in flipping houses," he told me. "I'm interested in honoring them. And if this one comes with its own guardian spirit, well, that's a bonus." I asked if he was comfortable with the condition that a guest house be built for me, tucked on the back edge of the property where the garden sloped toward the pines. He smiled. "That sounds perfect." The offer came 2 days later. Market value plus 15%. The contract included my permanent residency in the new cottage, full access to my belongings, and a clause preventing the Grangers from interfering with the sale. Ginevra had even arranged the inspections to happen, while Fleur and Cedric were out furniture shopping. I signed the papers with a pen that didn't shake. Then I tucked the copies into my coat pocket and rode home in silence, the keys pressing cool against my palm. The sale was finalized on a quiet Thursday morning, signed in an unmarked office above a florist's shop. Ginevra brought pastries. Cormac wore a pressed linen shirt. I dressed in the navy coat Miriam always said made me look respectable enough to be underestimated. When it was done, I walked out with a folder of signed contracts, a key to my future, and a strange lightness I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in weeks, the sun broke through the clouds as I stepped outside. It felt like a signal, or maybe a blessing. That evening, while Fleur was out at a yoga class and Cedric was working late from the kitchen island, I crept into the sunroom and pulled up the loose floorboard beneath the cot. I tucked the documents inside a plastic sleeve with the deed transfer, the purchase agreement, and the builder's outline for the guest house that would rise from the garden edge like a quiet defiance. Inspections were arranged like clockwork. Ginevra scheduled them mid-mornings when Fleur liked to take the car to her mother's seamstress, and Cedric was always in conference calls. The inspector entered through the back gate, clipboard in hand, and was gone before anyone noticed. I kept the keys hidden in my coat pocket. The originals never turned over. Cormac agreed to wait until the final signature cleared the registry, and until then, he told no one. Not even his brother, who lived just 3 blocks away. Inside the house, life continued on as if nothing had changed. Fleur painted the bathroom sage green and called it fresh. Cedric installed a new water filter. Nicolette studied in the same chair I used to knit in earbuds, always in head tilted toward the window. I watched them all in silence. I answered questions with nods. I made tea when asked. I kept folding laundry, picking weeds, boiling oats in the mornings. But every motion had a center now, a purpose. Because beneath their feet, my house was no longer theirs, and soon they would find out. Revised to 330 words. The smell of catered rosemary bread greeted me before I even reached the door. Fleur had turned my home into a stage, white tablecloths, string lights in the garden, laughter bouncing off the walls. I walked in with Cormac and Ginevra beside me, calm, ready. Cedric opened the door, face pinched. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I have something to say," I replied, stepping past him. Fleur appeared behind him, wine glass in hand. Her smile faltered. The room went quiet as guests turned toward us. I raised my voice just enough. "This house was sold last week. The transaction is complete. You have 30 days to vacate." The silence was instant. Even the music had stopped. Fleur blinked. Cedric's mouth opened, then closed. He looked to Ginevra, who handed him a copy of the signed deed transfer. "My parents are moving in," Fleur finally said. "They sold their home for this." "I didn't sell it to them," I answered. "I sold it to a buyer who will honor the land and build me a guest cottage. Legally, quietly, permanently." Prudence looked stricken. Gar stood frozen beside her champagne glass, trembling. Cedric tried to push back. "You can't just sell it while I can." "I did." Cormac stood beside me, hands in his pockets. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. Ginevra stepped forward. "Everything is recorded with the county. The sale is final. You were never owners. You were guests." Fleur's face turned pale, her hand tightening on the wine glass. "You did this to punish us." "No," I said already, turning for the door. "I did it to reclaim what was mine." We left them standing in the room they thought they'd conquered, surrounded by canapes and confusion. I didn't look back as the door closed behind us. Revised to 330 words. The first call came the next morning, just past 8. Cedric's voice was strained, coated in a thin veneer of wounded surprise. "Mom, you blindsided us." I sat at the little desk in my Pinebrook suite, real coffee warming my hands. Outside, the trees barely moved. "I acted within my rights," I said. "You knew the deed was still in my name. We had plans. Fleur's parents. I had a life," I said quietly. one you pushed out like old furniture." He was silent for a moment. Then the line clicked and went dead. That afternoon, Fleur arrived without warning. She carried a small bouquet of supermarket hydrangeas and wore a smile too careful to be sincere. The front desk rang up. I told them to send her in. She sat with her legs crossed, eyes darting across the room like she was inventorying it. "I just thought, maybe we could undo this," she said. "For the grandchildren. They're confused. Hurt. What is it you want, Fleur?" She straightened her skirt. "You could cancel the sale. Postpone it. Let's talk like a family." I let her finish. Then I looked her straight in the eye. "You chose to erase me. This is just me, choosing not to disappear." Her tone cooled. "You really think living alone at your age is wise? I've already rented a place by the water. It's peaceful, and it's mine." She stood slowly smoothing her coat. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. I walked her to the door and opened it for her. "I regret giving up parts of myself to make room for people who only wanted more, but not this." She hesitated, then left without another word. I closed the door with care, then sat by the window, breathing in the silence. The sea was out there waiting. So was my next chapter. The ground broke 2 weeks after I moved into the beachside apartment. From my balcony, I could see the old property, still stately from a distance though, now hollow in spirit. Ginevra sent me regular updates. Cormac dropped by the site daily. The crew knew exactly what to do, and they worked with a calm confidence I found soothing. Each wooden beam lifted into place felt like a sentence rewritten, one where I had finally taken control of the story. I walked the sand every morning, letting the cold air sting my face. I joined a local pottery class at the community center. My hands stiff, at first found rhythm again shaping clay. I made small bowls, then mugs, then a vase for the first bouquet I bought myself in over a decade. Cormac visited often, sometimes with drawings for the interior layout, other times with nothing but 2 coffees and a story from his studio days. He never overstayed. He never pushed. He just showed up and stayed present. That more than anything began to stitch something back together in me. Nicolette started coming every Saturday. No earbuds, no rush. She'd bring books or questions about college. Sometimes she helped me pick fabrics for the guest house curtains. Other times, we just sat in silence, sipping tea and watching the tide come in. She liked the quiet here. She said it made her feel like herself again. One afternoon, after the final beam had gone up and the workers packed away their tools for the day, we sat on the newly finished deck. The bay glowed in late sun. Nicolette's head rested lightly against my shoulder. "They treated me like baggage," I said, watching the light shift over the water. Nicolette looked up. "But you came back as the deed holder." I smiled. The air smelled like cedar and salt and something new. The life I was supposed to fade away in had become something altogether different. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. At 74, I finally chose myself, and that choice saved me.